and we're live.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us at our Retribe Talks. Today, we are continuing the momentum coming off of Mental Health Awareness Week and Month. And we're going to be doing these as often as we can on the topics that we feel we're drawn to share with you guys in our experiences. This week and I think over the next month, we're going to be talking about compassion. So the other day we talked about compassion, and it's quite easy to define in how we act and treat other people. But today, we're going to be talking about compassion and its relationship with self. So it's going to be an interesting topic. We've got 15 minutes. Melissa, do you want to kind of recap what we talked about with regards to what compassion means?
I was so nervous you're going to ask me to start, and I don't remember. But I think let me just make it up as I go along. That's not true. I believe what we were kind of started dancing around was the idea of compassion being able to sit in the suffering of ourselves, like of another person's suffering, as well as sit with our own suffering, which we'll elaborate today. But that seems the idea of compassion being an act, as compassion being something we have to show up for, not something that's like exists innately inside of us, but something we do have to choose consciously in terms of our relationship and navigating our relationships and the world around us. So the recap would be compassion as a choice for our navigating this world.
Yeah, and some of the things that I talked about, which is, humility and trying to do things without pride and ego in the way, but they were always actions towards other people, being gentle, being kind, trying to not judge. These are ways that I can practice compassion. But I think in this topic, like it's very easy to be compassionate to people out there sometimes, but how come we can't talk to ourselves the way we talk to other people, especially somebody who we've just met, and we're being kind and we're trying to play our A game and we're being gentle and nice and everything, but yet I'll look in the mirror and I'll be like, I'm fat, I'm old, I don't have enough money, I'm stressed out, I'm these things, all these things, all these stuff that I wouldn't judge someone else for, but it's so easy to judge me, especially, looking in the mirror, winding down the day, having had a 50th birthday not too long ago, very easy to not be gentle and kind with myself with words. And then also actions, like it's so easy just for me, I don't want to drink anymore, but it's easy to go pick up a donut and be like, I'm not going to be compassionate with myself. I'm going to feed myself sugar, which I know I shouldn't be doing. And I think this is the interesting thing of compassion is it's a relationship with other people, but also with ourselves.
Yeah. Michelle, do you want to go?
Oh, yeah. I was just off of that thought. Thank you, Mel. Off of that thought, it's being compassionate with other people when you're not compassionate with yourself is exhausting. Because if you're not kind to yourself, and it's not that it doesn't come naturally in a bad way, but your innate instinct would be, what can I say to this person to help them feel better? But it goes into your mind and your thinking. And when you're being something that is not authentic to yourself, whether that's a positive thing or a negative thing, or fueling or not fueling, or energetic or not energetic, it drains your own energy to then be something else, be something that you're not to yourself. And that can feel super, super exhausting, and more exhausting than like physical labor quite often when you do that emotional excavation. And being able to then being able to be compassionate with yourself means so many different things. I remember when I first sort of entered the world of work and started exploring on my own 2 feet, and people, started my whole spiritual healing journey, and people would say, love all of the parts of yourself. And I'd be like, what? But that doesn't make any sense. Who does that at the beginning, before I had like the years of experience and the amazing blessings that I've had since then? But it really is understanding what that means, what it means to love the parts, like Mel, you say this phrase a lot, to love the parts of yourself that you might not want to, or you might not like, or, and it touches on being able to open up that can.
And to bring both of you just said into and weave another thread into this little thing we're creating, is that we're taught that love because that's what the foundation of it has to look like, sometimes selfless acts. And that is fine, that's true. But what that also gets like kind of mixed up with is that you forget about yourself and you prioritize somebody else. So somebody else's suffering becomes more important than yours. Somebody else's needs become more important than yours. And not to say they are or not, but it's yours are just as. The way it expresses itself, the way it lands on us is all different. But really, when we break it down, how are we meant to know how to sit with somebody in their suffering if we don't know how to sit deeply in ours? And I think we kind of talked about this before, yes, whenever the last one was 2 days ago. It's people are only able to meet you as deeply as you've met yourself. So if you're walking around on a very surface level, that's fine, but you can't meet somebody deep in their pain if you don't know yourself deep in your pain and embrace it too. So I think we're taught, Nick, to go back to your point, we're taught that we can beat ourselves up and that's acceptable in a sense. Like we can punish ourselves and that's okay, but don't punish other people, when it's really why can't we be our own friend first, and then we know how to show up in friendship, in love, in suffering with somebody else. So it is a very symbiotic relationship.
I think for me, it was what I needed to go through is a bit that you talked about at the beginning, which is like to be selfless towards other people. It was in doing that I started to learn ways to be compassionate for myself, because I didn't know anything about the language. I didn't know anything about the acts of care, how to be gentle. Although I could speak softly and I could be polite, the essence of really being able to, make love not an exchange. Where I would give something with the try and expect something back. So I think, Mel, you call it transactional, right? So where I learned that I could give something with no expectation to give back. And then this started to build some self-esteem in me, because they were acts of selflessness that where there was no exchange. It was a one-way street where I was doing something for somebody and not expecting anything in return. And in that, I learned compassion for myself. I learned how to be able to look in the mirror, a year ago and go, I'm actually proud of you, Nick, for the first time. I think that was at 49 years old, the first time I really practiced compassion for myself, when I acknowledged some of the things that I'd done and actually said, I'm proud of you. And then that started a whole new journey for me around self-care, which I guess is just another form of compassion for self, where I could start to, learn to love myself.
We're also taught, oh, Michelle, go on, sorry.
I was just going to add in, I think as well, the language that we use is so important when it comes to compassion, and also the order or our concepts and constructs. So thinking that there isn't a hierarchy, somebody else is more important than me, and this is thinking that even exists, places restrictions before you've even started to explore your own self.
Yeah. It's like this linear, there's safety, I think, for humans sometimes to have things be linear and like organized and packaged, because then we could make sense of it and we can know what we're working with, because there is this fear of not knowing. And there's fear of like, what if I choose love today? I know how to choose fear unconsciously or consciously. Maybe it's not fear, maybe it's just patterns, familiarity. But it is the idea, like, what happens if I choose love? I'm going to take us on a tangent, so I'm just going to bring us back. The idea, going back to like loving the parts of ourselves and the languaging around that, is the idea we're also taught, Nick, to your point, both of your points, like that we're taught that love could be an exchange of like a transactional kind of relationship, where it's like you do this to get something, or that person does that to get something. And it's almost like a competitive nature of like, well, I love you more because I'm doing this. Or you're loving me less because you're doing that. So we teach ourselves on some level, we program ourselves, or we get all this kind of different messaging around what love looks like. And there's this like disconnect between, I think last week or 2 days ago, we talked about like moving from here to here, right? And what would your heart say, or what would your brain try to make sense of? And there seems to be the little bit of disconnection. So I'm rambling, but the idea is to say, yes, we're also taught that some parts of us are easier to love. And I think the trick and the challenge and the practice becomes, can you love that too? Can you love the part of yourself that somebody might have told you wasn't so lovable? Can you love that too? Because once you start that, however hard it is, then it doesn't actually matter around somebody else's ability to receive that love. Because the practice is, can you receive your own shadow bits? I'll end it there. One of you.
I think that one of the things that I'm learning about compassion towards self is about the word comparison. And we all live in a world where we're comparing ourselves with our peers and our colleagues and our, people who maybe we've known in the past, and old friends. And I don't know if you guys are, but I compare myself to them and the things that they've got. And sometimes I will say, because on the outside, I don't have as much as them, then I'll create some kind of dialogue that says that I'm a failure, And I think what I'm learning is to, in a world of comparisons, is that we don't need to compare, and that's something that I work on daily with regards to compassion for myself, is just trying not to compare, just go and move about the day as a gentleman and as kindly as I can be, but just try not to compare. And it's a practice. It's definitely a practice.
Yeah. Well, it's the coming back to it, right? Like that's the other thing of having compassion, is there's no such thing maybe as a failure, or there's maybe a step back or a little misstep. But the idea is, okay, you acknowledge it, and then it's the in between, it's the bounce back where like, I did that. I beat myself up. I called me that. Okay, I did it. So how do I sit with knowing that and for almost be okay with that? I did it and know I can go forward. So a couple of quotes came to mind is, first, obviously you can't, I don't know if it's obvious, it's not that obvious, but to compare somebody's external with your internal is just a hot mess. It's a disaster waiting to happen, because we only see a snippet of something. Yeah, so I think the quote was like, you can't compare somebody's highlight reel to your behind the scenes. I don't know who said that. It was a meme somewhere a while back, right? And that makes sense, because we only let people see what we think they need to see, so we could feel better about ourselves. Potential. We can go deeper into that. And the other idea is that we're all masterpieces and work in progress at the exact same time, right? So we're perfect, and we're so also in motion to get to that perfection, whatever that means. So there's that piece too. I can't remember who said that. Peter Crone, maybe. We're masterpieces and work in progress at the exact same time. So I'm going to offer that. Michelle, go on.
No, that was beautifully said. Like it's so important to understand those two work simultaneously, and it is breaking down what we think exists that actually doesn't exist, and actually saying to yourself, what is real here? And that doesn't start on the outside of you. That's completely in you, and that's not in your head either. That it happens somewhere else in your body.
Yeah, and that two things can be true at the same time, man. Like, I think that's the thing, going back to this linear packaging and all these things, is like, we can hold both truths, however seemingly opposite or oppositional they are. Two things can be true about yourself at the same time. I think that was the blog last week or something where I kind of wrote about, right? Like, we can be like super strong and then also spend a weekend on a ball crying. Like, doesn't counter the other one. So I think when we talk about the relationship with self, is that we can be all the things in 1 minute, in one moment. And that doesn't mean one is better or right or wrong. It just means both things can be true. And I think that idea of like, what is true is a good way to start for the question of what is true.
And a way to wrap up today with a question. Michelle, we are on Friday, and we're moving on. Do you have the topic for Friday, the next title?
Yep, Friday we're meeting at 2:30 p.m, not 3 p.m, so 2:30 on Friday, and we're talking about compassion within relationships. So moving from ourselves and how we can interact with compassion with someone else.
All that in 15 minutes. Cool.
Amazing. Thanks everyone for joining us. We'll see you on Friday. Everybody have a great rest of your day, no matter where you are in the world. Bye for now.